question that often comes back is multiverse. What comics do you read? We'll take a look at that in just a minute. Hello heroes and villains, welcome to Multiverse. So we have reached 25,000 subscribers, and for that I have to say thank you. Obviously, that would not happen without you guys. For that I'm very grateful. I have to admit, when I first started this little channel, did not even think that would be possible to reach that number, and now here we are. And a question that comes back from time to time is, Multiverse, what comics do you read? Sadly, some people might be a bit disappointed. I don't really read recent comics. The comics I read, especially right now, are pretty much older comics from way back when. And lately I've been getting a lot of older comics from a Kindle. I bought a little Kindle tablet not too long ago, and technically you can read the Kindle comics on your PC, but it's not a really good experience on the PC. It's much more pleasant to read those on a tablet. So I bought a little tablet, not just to read the comics, but reading the comics was a big reason why I did buy the tablet. So let's take a quick look at the comics I have here. It'll give you an idea of the kind of comics I kind of like. The first thing is the adventure comics with our friend the Spectre. These are comics that dates from the 70s, but I read those way back in the 80s. In the 80s, there was this miniseries called The Wrath of the Spectre, where for some reason they decided to reprint some old Spectre comics from the 70s. And these were awesome comics, and I was a big fan of Jim Aparo, who was doing the artwork in those comics, so it was quite a treat to get that miniseries. Another comic I really enjoyed way back when, it's a comic that dates from the 90s, is Astro City. A lot of people complain about the 90s. They keep on mentioning that the 90s comics were not good, that Image comics were not good. But they often forget that we still got some really good comics in the 90s, and Astro City is a great example of that. Astro City was pretty good all the way up to, I would say, the Dark Ages. With the Dark Ages, I have to admit, I couldn't really read after that, but up to Dark Ages, the Astro City comic was pretty awesome. And the best of the bunch was the Astro City Confession storyline. That's by far my favorite story. And ironically enough, Marvel copied that story. Basically, Marvel took a 6-issue series and they turned it into like a 5-year event. If you ever read Civil War and then Invasion, basically what Marvel did was copy Astro City. I remember when we saw the bit where Elektra gets shot and then she turns into a Skrull. We can see that sequence almost frame for frame in Astro City. Another comic I really enjoyed is West Coast Avengers. The original miniseries, holy crap, was it a good series. The ongoing series was quite the same, as they often do. There was one creative team on the miniseries, and then when they launched the ongoing series, they launched it with a totally different creative team, so it wasn't really the same comic, but the miniseries was, I would say, it was a masterpiece. I'll try to make videos about some of those comics, so that you guys can truly appreciate how awesome those comics are. And then, of course, there's the Batman. I especially enjoyed the Batman by Jim Aparo. I really enjoyed the time he was drawing the Batman in Brave and the Bold. You'll see that probably a bit later. But also, ironically enough, like the issue of Batman here was the first issue I bought after Crisis on Infinite Earth, and it so happened that, as luck would have it, it was Jim Aparo returning to the comic, and holy crap, did I enjoy it. Speaking of the Brave and the Bold, I did buy one of the Brave and the Bold Bronze Age comic, but I bought some more a bit further down the line. You'll see them in just a minute. Of course, there's Batman and Spirit. Oh, the crap, did I enjoy that. It was by the late Darwin Cook, and it was a pretty fun comic. And of course, again, some more Batman by Jim Aparo. And The Death in the Family. Then we have Gotham by Gaslight. That was pretty much the first Elseworld. Technically, the first Elseworld was probably Dark Knight Returns. But Gotham by Gaslight was the first official Elseworld comic that was published way back when. And then we have The Batman by Neil Adams. Sadly, Neil Adams passed away not too long ago. But if you want to be able to appreciate some great Batman comics, there's 3 volumes with tons of Batman stories in them. So I would strongly suggest get those if you can. And then we have Batman Son of the Demon. Way back when, that's a comic that dates from the late 80s, pretty much around the time of Dark Knight Returns, Watchmen, and all those comics. Comics were trying to be more adult, more serious, and Son of the Demon was one of those. I truly enjoyed it. Again, some more Batman by Jim Aparo. It's a collection of a whole bunch of Batman stories. most of them by Jim Aparo. And of course, we have The Dark Knight Returns. I really enjoyed it when it was first released, and I still enjoy it now. And sadly, the comics that follow, the sequel to Dark Knight Returns, that's an unreadable mess in my book. I know some people still enjoy the sequels to The Dark Knight Returns, but I just couldn't get into those. The only sequel to Dark Knight Returns I kind of liked was the Spawn Batman comic by Todd McFarlane. And of course, we have The Killing Joke. Again, I guess another attempt to try to make comics more adult. And later on, there's some people that started the rumor that apparently at the end of the story, Batman chokes the Joker and kills him. That's bullcrap. That's BS on so many levels. It's not even funny. I was there way back when the comic was first published, and this comic was not an Elseworld. It was not out of continuity. It was in continuity. Basically, we had the last Batgirl comic with Barbara Gordon a month or two before that. Then we got The Killing Joke, and then afterwards we had Barbara Gordon in a wheelchair, and she became Oracle after a while. And the Joker wasn't dead in those comics either. So the whole thing about the story being out of continuity and the Joker, Batman choking the Joker at the end, and that's totally made up bullcrap for whatever reason. And of course, we have Batman Year One. Ironically enough, it's not so much a Batman story as a Jim Gordon story. I guess Frank Miller wanted to tell a detective story more than a Batman story, and it gave us Batman Year One. And there is Battle Chasers. I truly enjoyed that comic. Already way back when I was trying to make a fantasy, like a D&D comic, but sort of with a superhero sensibility, superhero look. And Battle Chasers beat me to the punch. But I truly enjoyed that comic. Even sadly, their storyline was never finished. It ended after 8 issues, I think. So I wish we could have had the rest of the story, but oh well. And there's Blackest Night. Holy crap, did I enjoy that comic. I didn't expect to enjoy it as much. Basically, a lot of people keep on complaining about crossover fatigue or event fatigue or that kind of stuff. Blackest Night was a great example that people are not so much, it's not so much crossover fatigue as bad crossover fatigue. Because when it comes to Blackest Night, not only did I get the Blackest Night comic, I got the Green Lantern comic that was linked to Blackest Night, and I got a whole bunch of tie-ins that was linked to Blackest Night. I think I got almost all the tie-ins at the time, except maybe 1 or 2 for some reason. But holy crap, was it a good event. And sadly, it went downhill afterwards. But at the time Blackest Night was published, holy crap, did we have some great comics. And there's a comic I'm sure a lot of you guys don't know about called Black Sad. I saw that as a French comic way back when, like in the early, I think it was 2001 or something like that. I remember going, I was working in the studio at the time, and during my lunch break, I went to the library. I saw this comic, Black Sad. I brought it back to the studio, and the next day, everyone in the studio went to buy that comic, just to show you how awesome that comic is. I don't think I have the whole set. There's probably one more I should purchase, but holy crap, is that a good comic. And then we have the classic Bone. Ironically enough, I only read the first 3-4 trade paperback, and at the time the schedule was a bit erratic. The comic wasn't published regularly. Sometimes there was pretty much a long wait between issues. So that's probably why I stopped reading the comic at some point. I was tired of waiting 3, 4, 6 months for the next issue. Then once the whole storyline was published, it took me forever to go back and buy it, and now here we are. Checkmate. I love that comic. Sadly, it only lasted, I think, 28, 30 issues, something like that. It was a fun spy thriller, but with a superhero element. Loved it. And Conan. Holy crap, did I love that run. The first volume has artwork by Barry Windsor-Smith, and ironically enough, I remember at the time when I first saw those comics, like basically I was used to reading Conan by John Buscema, and then I'm not sure why I saw a few issues by Barry Windsor-Smith, and it was a bit weird at first. It wasn't at all the same as Buscema, but after a while I got used to it. And so the first volume is by Barry Windsor-Smith. The other 3 volumes are by John Buscema. Roy Thomas wrote the whole thing, if I recall correctly. And the best comics by Buscema were those inked by Ernie Chan. Holy crap, John Buscema and Ernie Chan together, that was magic. And I would suggest with Conan, if you don't want to miss out, basically Marvel lost the license, or are about to lose the license for Conan. So they've been reprinting a whole bunch of Conan's omnibuses, probably to try to make a bit of cash before they lose the license. So I would strongly suggest don't wait until it's too late. Get those omnibuses while you can, because soon those probably won't be available anymore. I didn't go further in the fourth omnibus, especially after issue 120, I think. I didn't like the series quite as much, but volume 2, 3, and 4 by John Buscema and sometimes by Ernie Chan, those are masterworks. And we have Cosmic Odyssey. Holy crap, did I enjoy that comic. I wasn't a big fan of Mike Mignola before then. I thought his style was a bit weird, but then when I saw there used to be this magazine called Comic Scene, and in it sometimes they would have interviews about certain creators or about upcoming comics. And in Comic Scene, we had a few previews. There was Comics Odyssey, and around the same time also there was Gotham by Gaslight. And in Comic Scene, I saw some artwork from those comics, and even better yet, I saw some black and white artwork from those comics. Like the artwork with Gotham by Gaslight or with Cosmic Odyssey was pretty awesome, and in black and white, it was even better. So that's when I truly learned to appreciate Mike Mignola, and of course, Crisis on Infinite Earth. There's nothing I can really say about that most people haven't said already. It's a masterwork, and it's a feat that has not been equaled even up to this day. The closest I can think of was maybe Blackest Night came close, JLA Avengers came close, but Crisis on Infinite Earths was an awesome event, and sadly it was as good as it gets. But we did get some good crossovers afterwards, just not as good as Crisis on Infinite Earths. Danger Girl, fun comic. I really enjoyed it. It was made to be a fun, lighthearted comic, and that was it. This Universe by Mike Mignola. Again, early on I did not really appreciate Mike Mignola, but once I did, I was trying to get as much comics from Mike Mignola as I could, and this is a great sample of a whole bunch of stories by Mike Mignola. There's also a few covers, I think, and stuff like that. Pretty awesome. The New Frontier. Holy crap, did I love that comic. My friend Jim gave me the Absolute Edition way back when. Obviously, I missed out. When the comic was first published, I completely missed out on it. I did not even know it existed. And then I remember seeing out that we're going to make an animated version of the New Frontier. And at first I thought it was like JSA the Golden Age. When I read the description, it kind of sounded a bit like the story from JSA the Golden Age. Basically the transition between the JSA leading up to the Justice League. And it wasn't exactly it. And then my friend Jim, who's awesome, sent me the Absolute Edition from New Frontier, and holy crap, loved it. And here we have our friend Deadshot. At the time, the Suicide Squad comic was pretty popular, and the rising star, I guess, from the comic was Deadshot, so they gave him his own miniseries. Loved it. Deathlok the Demolisher. This is only the sample. I should probably buy the actual book. I didn't get around to doing that just yet, but holy crap, was it an awesome... I first saw the character in the pages of Captain America around the time that GM DeMatteis and Mike Zeck were working on the book. It was probably the end of their run, and I got a paperback later on. Holy crap, did I enjoy that. The Demon by Jack Kirby. Again, there's nothing really you can say. Jack Kirby is a master. The Demon was a great comic that he did at the time. Loved it. Again, Doctor Strange and Doctor Doom by Mike Mignola. Again, a masterpiece. It's a great comic. This is the one book I have right now. I didn't buy a lot of books for a bunch of reasons, but this is a fun series, and this is a 3-book series, and somehow I only read the first 2 books. Never got around to reading the 3rd book. So to this day I didn't read the 3rd book, so I'm gonna have to do it soon. Green Arrow. Ironically enough, I read the Green Arrow ongoing series first, and then later on I read Green Arrow the Longbow Hunter. I think I read the series up to issue 75, and afterwards, sadly, I think they changed creative team or something. But it was a great series at the way back when. Again, it was at the time where they were trying to make comics more adult, more mature. And I think this is Green Arrow. The ongoing series is pretty much the first quote-unquote mature series that I bought way back when. And then I had to go back and buy Green Arrow the Longbow Hunter as back issues, and I had to pay $20 for each issues, which was a lot of money for me at the time. And it was the first time I was spending so much for a back issue. Green Lantern Rebirth. I remember when we first heard about that, I didn't think much about it, but then when I read the comic way too late. I think I read it way after the Green Lantern's Initial War, and actually it was a pretty great comic. Hawk and Dove, I loved that miniseries. I think it was a 5 issue miniseries. It introduced me to Rob Liefeld, and I know a lot of people don't like his work, but I really enjoyed his work in that series, and I did enjoy it in other comics. And here, the mixture of Rob Liefeld, inked by Carl Kessel, holy crap, was it good! And sadly, they did a mistake that they often do. Then eventually, they gave us the Hawk and Dove ongoing series, and they gave us the Hawk and Dove ongoing series with a different penciler and with a different inker. If at least they had kept the inker, if they had changed the penciler but kept Carl Kessel as the inker, it probably would have helped. But basically, they created an ongoing series based on the success of the miniseries, but they went with a completely different art team, which sadly never is a good thing. The series lasted about 28, 30 issues maybe, but despite all of the flaws it may have, I loved it. Hulk the End, and it also includes Hulk Future Imperfect by George Perez. Ironically enough, I don't have a lot of comics by George Perez. Big fan of George Perez. I guess I'm gonna have to look through a Kindle and try to find more George Perez comics to purchase. And next we have Iron Man. This is pretty much the best era for Iron Man. Around the time they did the storyline for the Demon in a Bottle. Iron Man was pretty much an A-list book way back when. I know a lot of people today seems to see Iron Man as a B, C, D-list character, and I just cannot understand that. Way back when I was a kid, we had this cheesy comic where we had Iron Man, Captain America, Hulk, Namor, and I'm forgetting Thor. And in my neck of the wood, Iron Man was an A-list character, especially when we had the Bob Layton, David Michelini, John Romita Jr. working on the book. It was an A book. It was an A-list book way back when. Although we didn't know at the time that it was as good as it would get. Like basically, this was by far the best era for the character. And sadly, afterwards, they were never able to get close to that. There's a few times, like around the time of the Armor War, the book was pretty good, but not as good as during that time. This is pretty much when the book peaked, and sadly afterwards, no creative team was able to match that. So I'm always a bit puzzled when I see people call Iron Man a C-D-list character, because he's an A-list character. The problem is not so much the characters as the creative people who worked on the book, and who did a terrible job giving us Iron Man comics since then. And here we have some more Batman by Jim Aparo. Basically at the time, I saw this book, this first book at the library, and I tried to purchase it. That's pretty much when I started buying Kindle books. I was trying to purchase it, so I went to various bookstores to try to order it. None of them could order the book, and the one place I found that could order the book told me 3, 4, 6 months later that they couldn't order it after all. So I had to bite the bullet at the time, and I had to buy the book from Kindle, because that's the only place where I could actually purchase it. And it has a ton of great stories, of great Batman stories, drawn by Jim Aparo and written by Bob Haney. Kingdom Come, not much I can say about that other than by Alex Ross with some great artwork. It's pretty much a classic comic at this point. Legends, great book by artwork by John Byrne. I'm a big fan of John Byrne, especially John Byrne from the 70s and 80s. This is pretty much John Byrne in his prime. It's also the comic that gave us the Justice League International comic, gave us the Suicide Squad comic afterwards, and holy crap, was it a good comic. Legends of the Dark Knight, pretty much the last detective comics stories from before Crisis on Infinite Earth, with some great artwork by Alan Davis. I'm a big fan of Alan Davis. Sadly, I don't have a lot of comics by Alan Davis, but this is a great comic to have. The Legion of Superheroes, The Great Darkness Saga. Holy crap, did I enjoy that story. I didn't know anything about Darkseid at the time. I barely knew the Legion. I had a handful of Legion comics before then. And then we got the, and this was not, way back when, this was part of a monthly comic. It wasn't a special comic that was made like The Dark Knight Returns or Watchmen or special one-shot comic. It was basically the monthly comic that turned into an epic storyline, and it's by far the best Legion of Superhero storylines we had. Kind of like Iron Man, this is pretty much where the book was as good as it can get, and sadly afterwards, no creative team were able to match that comic, sadly. Manhunter, it was a fun little series. I think it lasted again maybe 30 issues, but I really enjoyed that series at the time. She-Hulk by John Byrne. I think it's the few official original Marvel graphic novels that John Byrne worked on. There might be another one that I failed to remember. But again, way back when, they were attempting to make comics more adult. more mature, and this is one of those attempts. And here we have a little trade paperback by Alan Davis with the Fantastic Four, Daredevil, Wolverine, and Thor. But in a roundabout ways, it was more about a group that Davis had created way back when called the Clandestine, or Clandestiny, I'm not sure how to properly say it. Marvel Visionaries by James Steranko. James Steranko did a very short run on Captain America. I think he did 3 or 4 issues. Somehow these ended up being very influential, and a lot of people see those as a masterpiece. There's also other stories, like there's an XMen story in there that is probably seen as the worst XMen story ever, but you can see how Steranko was trying to be innovative, even when sometimes he wasn't quite as successful. Master of Kung Fu, I love that comic. Sadly, the movie is nothing like the comic. If you saw the movie and you don't like the movie, you still might like the comic because the comic is very different from the movie. So if you did not see the movie, or if you don't like the movie, don't worry, the comic is nothing like the movie. So you could still enjoy the Master of Kung Fu comics if you wanted to. Basically, the Master of Kung Fu was what if Bruce Lee was in the Marvel Universe, and what if Bruce Lee was James Bond. So basically we have Shang-Chi, the son of Fu Manchu, who's modeled after Bruce Lee. You can even see it at some point when Paul Galassi draws the comic. He literally draws Bruce Lee. There's no hiding it. He literally was drawing Bruce Lee, and Shang-Chi was part of MI6. So Shang-Chi was pretty much a mixture of Bruce Lee and James Bond, at least James Bond from the 70s. But it gave us some awesome comics. Mr. Miracle by Jack Kirby. What can be said other than this is an awesome comic? I just have your Moon Knight sample. I should probably get the whole thing eventually. Multiversity, a cool comic by Grant Morrison, so I had to have it. I had no choice. The New Gods by Jack Kirby. Holy crap, was it a great comic. Obviously, I did not read it when it was first published. I read it way back later. Obviously, there was these black and white reprints of the New Gods. Not just the New Gods, but all the Kirby series. And holy crap, was it, even in black and white, it was powerful stuff. And with color, I would say it's even better. The Phantom by Jim Aparo. Again, as I mentioned, I'm a big fan of Jim Aparo. I'm also a big fan of the Phantom. I know that the Phantom is not popular everywhere. From what I understand, the Phantom was very popular in some countries in Europe. It was very popular in Australia. And it was very popular here in Quebec, Canada. We had the Squadron Supreme, who pretty much touched a lot of themes that Watchmen tried to deal with. But before Watchmen did that, Squadron Supreme did it first. And then later on, they made some sort of a graphic novel to try to conclude the storyline. The graphic novel is not quite as good as the maxi series. And yeah, at the time, especially when you had a 4-issue series, they would call it the 4-issue miniseries. But here, this was a 12-issue, and when it was a 12-issue, they would call it the maxi series. Of course, some classic Superman stories, Superman from the animated series, and the evil Baron Zemo got his own miniseries at some point. Although, of course, seeing how he was the lead in the book, they pretty much made him an anti-hero. Although, pretty much since the Thunderbolts, they pretty much treated Baron Zemo as an anti-hero. Although later on, they did turn him back into an evil villain, but for a while, Zemo was pretty much an anti-hero, and he was pretty awesome at the time. Again, I mentioned how I really enjoyed the work of John Byrne, and here this is pretty much John Byrne trying to do his own version of Fantastic Four, although it was pretty much the Fantastic Three with a trio. And with Triple Helix, he tried to make his own version of X-Men. Although in theory, he already made his own version of X-Men before that. There was this series called Next Men, published by Dark Horse. It was sort of John Byrne's attempt to make his own X-Men. Sadly, I don't think it worked as well as he hoped. And here he made another attempt with Triple Helix, which sadly I don't think was that popular either. But we do have the X-Men, the actual X-Men by John Byrne and Chris Claremont. And this is also the volume that includes the Dark Phoenix saga. Great comics. Of course, Watchmen. Nothing I can say about Watchmen at this point. And then you have the Wolverine miniseries. And later on I decided to purchase the Omnibus. But at the time, at first I bought the miniseries. Great series by Chris Claremont and Frank Miller. But then in the Omnibus, you get a lot more than that. You get the stories from Marvel Comics Presents. You get the first 10 or 12 issues of the Wolverine ongoing series, and probably other stuff I failed to mention. And we got an Alan Davis Wolverine story, which is pretty 10 kinds of awesome. loved it. And of course, we also have a Wolverine story by Mike Mignola. At the time, I'm not sure why we got a handful of Wolverine one-shots, and these were 10 kinds of awesome. And last but not least, the X-Men by Jim Lee. And nothing really I can say about that people don't know already. So there you go, guys. So for those of you wondering what kind of comics Multiverse likes to read, these are a small sample of the comics I have. These are the comics I have with Kindle. Of course, there's other comics I have that I don't have in Kindle, like JSA The Golden Age, the Manhunter comic by Archie Goodwin and Walter Simonson. There's the New Teen Titans by George Perez. There's Superman The Man of Steel by John Byrne, but also by Jerry Ordway, and probably others I failed to mention. There's the Fantastic Four by John Byrne, love those. There's the Hulk by Peter David and Dale Keown. Holy crap, was that a good comic. There's also a few other comics like the New Warriors or the Thunderbolts. I've been toying with the idea of making a video series about the comics I like. I was toying with the idea of calling it Great Comics or Classic Comics. Classic Comics probably is a better name. I'll have to give it some more thoughts. But most of you guys probably come here to get videos about DC Universe Online. Although DC Universe Online being a DC game, I think some of you might enjoy videos about some classic DC comics. I guess we'll have to wait and see. So again, guys, we've crossed 25,000 subscribers, and for that, I have to say thank you. I never thought we would see the day, but now here we are. Now the next step is to reach 25 million subscribers. So again, guys, thank you for your support. It means the world to me, and as always, you guys are awesome.